The Utah wind howled across the Red Rock country as Jerry Blackwood stumbled through the sage and juniper, his right arm hanging useless at his side, his mining engineer's instruments scattered and broken behind him. At 58, the former territorial mining inspector had evaluated hundreds of claims across the frontier, prevented countless cave-ins through proper engineering, and spent 24 years bringing safety and science to the chaos of frontier mining. But he'd never expected to be beaten and maimed by his own mining company, betrayed for the crime of refusing to approve a silver mine that would collapse and kill dozens of workers. The sun beat down mercilessly on his battered body as he navigated the treacherous terrain. Each step sent waves of pain through his broken ribs, and his parched lips cracked and bled. The distant mesas shimmered in the heat, their red sandstone faces watching impassively as he fought for each painful breath. Jerry had spent decades reading the language of stone and earth, understanding the whispers of geological formations that others ignored. But now the land itself seemed indifferent to his suffering. "You're too cautious for modern mining, Blackwood." Superintendent Carver had snarled as his hired thugs worked Jerry over with pick handles and ore buckets. "This territory's got no use for engineers who can't tell the difference between safety and profit." Jerry could still feel the impact of each blow, the methodical brutality of men who had been instructed to make an example of him. Carver had stood watching, his expensive suit immaculate, gold watch chain gleaming in the lamplight of the mine office, as his men reduced decades of respected expertise to a broken heap on the floor. The profit had been Carver's plan to extract silver from an unstable vein using dangerous shortcuts that would triple production while ignoring the geological warnings that screamed of imminent collapse. When Jerry refused to sign off on the death trap and threatened to report it to territorial authorities, Carver had decided that a tragic mining accident would solve his problem permanently. "Should have stuck to reading rocks instead of reading regulations," Carver had laughed as they loaded Jerry onto a minecart and sent it rolling toward the wilderness. "Maybe the coyotes will appreciate your engineering principles." The cart had careened wildly down abandoned tracks, each jolt sending fresh agony through Jerry's battered body. When it finally derailed, hurling him into a ravine, he'd lain unconscious until the cold desert night had shocked him awake. He'd crawled from the wreckage, his professional dignity as shattered as his arm, and begun the desperate journey across terrain he'd once surveyed with scientific detachment. Now Jerry crawled through the red sand and slick rock, his shattered arms screaming with each movement, his vision blurred from the beating and the merciless desert sun. His throat burned with thirst, and the world tilted and swayed around him. He'd seen men die of exposure in this unforgiving landscape, prospectors who'd wandered too far from water, miners trapped by cave-ins, surveyors who'd miscalculated the harshness of the terrain. He recognized the symptoms in himself: the confusion, the painful swelling of his tongue, the hallucinations that danced at the edges of his vision. In the distance, he spotted smoke rising from a hidden canyon, the first sign of life he'd seen since the minecart had finally derailed miles from anywhere. He focused on that thin gray column, forcing his failing body forward one excruciating step at a time. The smoke wavered and disappeared several times, and Jerry feared it might be another desert mirage, a cruel trick of his desperate mind. But as he staggered closer, he caught the faint scent of burning juniper wood, and hope flickered to life within him. The trading post sat beside a natural spring, surrounded by ancient petroglyphs and ruins that spoke of people who'd found water in this harsh landscape for thousands of years. The building itself was a sturdy combination of local stone and timber, with a wide porch that offered shade from the relentless sun. Colorful Navajo rugs hung from the railings, and the windows gleamed with actual glass, a rarity in this remote region. Jerry collapsed at the wooden steps, his blood staining the weathered planks. The woman organizing supplies on the porch looked up at his approach. Tall and lean, with steel-gray hair braided with turquoise beads, her weathered face marking her as someone who'd spent decades under the desert sun. She wore practical frontier clothes with Navajo jewelry, and her brown eyes held the steady wisdom of someone who'd learned to read both people and landscapes with equal skill. "Sweet Mother Earth," she breathed, dropping her inventory sheets and rushing to his side. "What happened to you?" "Mining company," Jerry gasped through swollen lips. "My own superintendent tried to kill me." The woman, he'd later learn her name was Martha Desert Rose Yazzie, helped him inside with surprising gentleness for someone so strong. Her trading post was well organized and prosperous, with goods ranging from basic supplies to fine Navajo rugs and silver jewelry that spoke of someone who understood the value of both cultures. The interior was cooler than the brutal heat outside, and the scent of herbs and leather filled the air. "Your own company did this to your arm?" she asked, examining the damage with hands that moved with surprising skill. Her fingers probed the injury with the precision of someone who had set many broken bones before. "Caught them, building death trap. Didn't appreciate my interference." Jerry's voice was barely audible, his throat raw from thirst and dust. Martha's expression darkened with recognition. She'd seen this kind of beating before, the systematic brutality of men who believed profit justified any cruelty. "Bastards," she muttered. "Always ready to kill workers for a few more dollars." She brought him water first, supporting his head as he drank in small, careful sips. Then she cleaned his wounds with a mixture of boiled water and herbs that stung but seemed to reduce the inflammation almost immediately. Her movements were efficient and practiced, revealing years of experience treating injuries far from doctors or hospitals. "That arm needs proper setting," she said, examining the misshapen limb. "I can do it, but it'll hurt worse than the beating did." Jerry nodded weakly. "Do what you must." Martha gave him a piece of leather to bite down on, then manipulated the broken bones with swift, decisive movements. Jerry's scream echoed through the trading post despite the leather between his teeth. The pain was so intense that darkness swallowed him, and he welcomed the oblivion. For 2 months, Jerry lay helpless while Martha tended his wounds with a mixture of frontier medicine and traditional Navajo healing practices. His arm would never be right again. Too many bones had been shattered, but she managed to preserve enough function for him to hold simple tools and write reports. The fever that had threatened to claim him in those first critical days gradually subsided under her constant care. During his lucid moments, Jerry observed Martha's operation with professional interest. The trading post served as a nexus for multiple communities, Navajo families bringing in rugs and jewelry to trade, Mormon settlers seeking supplies, prospectors stocking up before heading into the wilderness, and occasional government officials or military patrols stopping for water and information. Martha handled each group with diplomatic skill, switching languages and customs as needed, maintaining the delicate balance that allowed her business to thrive in this contested borderland. When Jerry finally sat up clear-headed, he found Martha negotiating with a group of Navajo silversmiths, conducting business in a mixture of English, Navajo, and sign language. She handled the transaction with the respect and fairness that had made her trading post a neutral ground where all peoples could deal safely. "You speak Navajo," he observed, watching her work. The complex sounds of the language flowed naturally from her lips, and the Navajo men responded with obvious respect. "I speak whatever builds trust," Martha replied, examining a piece of turquoise jewelry with an expert eye. "Out here, you learn to respect all traditions, or you don't survive long." Her story emerged slowly over the following weeks as Jerry regained his strength. Martha was the daughter of a Mormon pioneer and a Navajo medicine woman, raised in both worlds until the Indian Wars forced her to choose sides. Her father had been a surveyor who'd married her mother after being nursed back to health following an attack by hostile tribesmen. Martha had inherited her father's mathematical mind and her mother's knowledge of the land and its healing properties. "My father taught me to read maps and survey land," she explained one evening as they sat by the spring, watching the stars emerge in the vast desert sky. "My mother taught me which plants heal and which kill, how to find water in dry country, and how to listen to the spirits of the land." She'd married a mining engineer who'd been killed in a deliberately caused cave-in, when he'd tried to expose unsafe working conditions, leaving her to survive with nothing but her knowledge of both cultures and her determination to build something better. "White men think I'm a half-breed," she explained, organizing her inventory with scientific precision. "Navajo think I'm an outsider. I walk between two worlds and try to build bridges." Jerry told her about Carver's conspiracy, the unsafe mine, the years of honest service repaid with treachery. Martha listened without judgment, occasionally nodding as if she'd heard similar stories before. "This Superintendent Carver," she said finally, "he thinks workers' lives are worth less than silver? He thinks I'm a fool for believing in safety over speed. Too old-fashioned to understand that mining is about taking risks, not avoiding them." Jerry flexed his damaged arm, wincing at the stiffness that would never fully heal. He represents the new breed of mining executives, men who've never been underground themselves, who see only numbers on ledgers rather than the faces of the men who dig their fortunes from the earth. "Maybe he's right about one thing," Martha said, her tone thoughtful. "Maybe the old way of mining is finished. Question is, what are you going to build to replace it?" The question lingered between them as Jerry's recovery progressed. He began helping around the trading post, applying his engineering knowledge to improve the water storage system and reinforce the structure against the seasonal flash floods that threatened the canyon. His damaged arm limited his physical capabilities, but his mind remained sharp, and he found unexpected satisfaction in solving practical problems that benefited the diverse community that relied on Martha's trading post. Their partnership began when a group of desperate miners arrived seeking help with a claim that kept collapsing, killing workers and destroying equipment. The men were a ragged bunch, their faces etched with grief and frustration. Their foreman, a burly Irishman named O'Malley, explained their situation with the blunt language of someone who'd spent his life underground. 3 dead last month, 2 more last week," he said, spreading crude maps across Martha's trading counter. "Company engineer says it's bad luck, but we know better. Something ain't right with that mountain." Jerry examined the maps with professional interest, his trained eye immediately spotting potential issues. "These support structures are inadequate for this type of formation," he observed, "and your ventilation shafts are positioned all wrong." "You know mining?" O'Malley asked skeptically, eyeing Jerry's twisted arm. "He was territorial mining inspector for 24 years, Martha interjected. "Knows more about safe mining than anyone in 3 territories." Jerry's engineering knowledge, combined with Martha's understanding of desert geology and traditional mining techniques, allowed them to identify the problem and design a solution that made the mine both safe and profitable. They visited the site together, Jerry analyzing the structural weaknesses while Martha identified underground water sources that were undermining the supports. "You still know your trade," Martha observed as they watched the miners celebrate their first safe extraction in months. The men had implemented their recommendations and successfully accessed a rich vein without a single accident. "No rock formations, no structural engineering, know how to read the signs when something's about to collapse," Jerry replied, awkwardly gripping the surveying instrument with his damaged arm. "Out here, that's still worth something." Word spread through the Utah Territory about the trading post at Blood Moon Mesa, where Desert Rose Yazzie and the crippled engineer could solve problems that had stumped territorial mining authorities for years. They developed a reputation for honesty that extended from the Colorado River to the Wyoming border. Mining companies began sending representatives to consult on difficult extractions. Independent prospectors sought their advice before staking claims. Even territorial officials occasionally requested their expertise on particularly challenging cases. Jerry found himself busier than he'd been as an official inspector, and for the first time in his career, he was working to protect miners, rather than simply maximize production. More importantly, they found in each other something they'd both thought lost: companionship, respect, and the slow-burning warmth of mature love built on shared exile and mutual understanding. Their relationship deepened gradually, neither rushing to define what was growing between them. Both had experienced profound loss and betrayal, and both understood the value of building foundations slowly and carefully. The confrontation with Superintendent Carver came 18 months later. He arrived with territorial mining officials and forged documents, claiming Jerry was mentally incompetent due to his injuries and needed to be placed under company supervision. Carver's party rode into the canyon with the arrogant confidence of men accustomed to imposing their will through intimidation and legal manipulation. "There's the old cripple," Carver announced, pointing at his former inspector. "Living in squalor with some half-breed squaw, probably doesn't even remember how to read a geological survey anymore." Jerry stepped out of the trading post, no longer the broken man Carver had left for dead. Hard work and purpose had strengthened his body, while finding his true calling had restored his spirit. His right arm was twisted and weak, but his mind was sharp and his voice carried the authority of genuine expertise. "Carver," he said calmly, "you're looking prosperous. The death trap business treating you well?" Carver's face flushed with anger. He was heavier than Jerry remembered, his expensive suit straining across his substantial belly, his face florid from rich food and hard liquor. Success had made him soft, but no less dangerous. "Don't get smart with me, Blackwood. I'm here on official territorial business." He gestured to the officials accompanying him, men in formal attire who looked uncomfortable in the harsh desert setting. "Official?" Martha stepped out beside Jerry, a rifle cradled in her arms. "Funny thing about that. I sent some messages to friends in Salt Lake City and Denver. Seems the territorial government's been investigating mining accidents." Carver's confidence wavered as he realized they'd been building a case against him for months. Martha's connections in both the Mormon and Navajo communities had provided access to witnesses and evidence that painted a clear picture of systematic negligence and deliberate endangerment. "This is a setup," Carver sputtered, his hand moving toward his gun. "No," came a new voice from the canyon rim. "This is justice." Chief Manuelito emerged from the rocks with a dozen Navajo warriors, their faces painted for war. They'd been tracking Carver's movements since learning of his plans to expand mining operations onto sacred tribal lands. The warriors positioned themselves strategically around the canyon, their rifles trained on Carver's party. "You want to destroy more sacred places?" Manuelito called out in perfect English. "Destroy your own grave first." The standoff stretched taut as a bowstring. Carver's officials were outnumbered and outgunned, facing not just angry Navajos but federal investigators who'd been tracking his conspiracy for over a year. The tension in the air was palpable, the desert silence broken only by the nervous shifting of horses and the soft click of weapons being readied. "This isn't over," Carver snarled, backing toward his horse. His hand still hovered near his pistol, his eyes darting between potential threats. "Yes, it is," came another new voice. A federal marshal rode into the canyon, flanked by territorial investigators and several angry mine owners who discovered Carver's plan to use their operations as cover for his unsafe practices. The marshal was a lean, hard-faced man whose badge gleamed in the sunlight. "Superintendent Carver, you're under arrest for fraud, conspiracy, and multiple counts of criminal negligence resulting in death." Carver's empire crumbled quickly once federal authorities began examining his mining records and interviewing survivors of his accidents. His conspiracy had reached far beyond the single silver mine, involving systematic safety violations that had killed dozens of workers across 3 territories. The investigation revealed a network of bribery, intimidation, and falsified reports that had allowed Carver to operate with impunity for years. He died in territorial prison 2 years later, still claiming he'd only been trying to maximize production. The official cause was listed as pneumonia, but rumors suggested that relatives of miners who died in his unsafe operations had arranged a more fitting end. "Feel better?" Martha asked as they watched the federal party disappear over the mesa, taking Carver away in chains. "Feel vindicated," Jerry replied, flexing his damaged arm. "For the first time since they crippled me, I feel like I'm protecting workers instead of just enriching owners." Their partnership deepened into something more profound than business or convenience. They established a mining consultation service that served the entire territory, providing safety inspections, geological surveys, and advocacy for workers who had no other voice in the dangerous world of frontier mining. Their reputation for integrity attracted clients from across the expanding Western territories, and their methods became a model for responsible resource extraction. "We make quite a team," Martha observed one evening as they sat by the spring, watching the sunset paint the red rocks in brilliant oranges and purples. The day's work was done, and they had taken their customary places on the bench Jerry had built from local timber. "We make a foundation," Jerry corrected, taking her weathered hand in his scarred one. "The kind that's built on safety rather than speed, on lives rather than profits." At 59, Jeremiah Blackwood was no longer the broken-down inspector who'd been beaten and left for dead by a corrupt superintendent. He was a protector of workers, a guardian of mining safety, and living proof that engineering was strongest when it served people rather than just profit margins. The desert that had nearly claimed his life had instead given him purpose, partnership, and the chance to use his expertise for something greater than mere extraction of wealth from the earth. The red rocks that had witnessed his desperate crawl toward survival now stood as silent sentinels over his redemption and renewal. And Martha Yazzie had found something she'd thought impossible. Not just love, but professional partnership with someone who saw her mixed heritage as an asset rather than a liability, who understood that the strongest foundations are built with respect for both the land and the people who work it. Together, they'd carved out their own piece of the American dream in the stunning beauty of Utah's Red Rock country, proving that sometimes the people society discards become the ones who build the safest structures. Their trading post became a beacon of integrity in the mining industry, Blood Moon Mesa Engineering, where worker safety and geological wisdom went hand in hand. The ore wagons still rolled past their canyon, carrying silver and gold across the expanding West. But now they carried something else as well. The knowledge that there were still places where human life mattered more than mineral wealth, where broken arms could still build unbreakable safety standards, and where two people who'd been written off by the world proved that the most valuable ore is the trust between partners who refuse to compromise their principles for profit.